The Narc Ninja, bringing you the tools and tactics to heal and deal with users and abusers. And now the Narc Ninja himself, Christopher Fairchild.
Welcome back to the 10th and final video in this limited 10-part series on identifying, dealing, and then healing from narcissistic abuse. Throughout my personal healing process and all of my work with other abuse survivors, there's something that's come up many times, and that is wondering why the abusive narcissistic people do the terrible things they do. What in the world could motivate somebody to harm any loved one or family member, closest friend, and why can't I wrap my head around this? Here's my answer. You can't, and you never will, because remorseless cruelty is not even in your DNA. There's not one thing inside of their unwellness that you will ever resonate with. Furthermore, there's no need for you to understand any of that. Will you ever be able to understand how a snake can, without any hesitancy or one drop of compunction, swallow an adorable, innocent little mouse whole? No, you can't, because you're not a snake. So please let go of any part of that kind of thinking forever. It really was never yours to reach for. All that you do need to understand is all of those unfailingly consistent and ubiquitous red flag warnings that identify every single narcissistic person who lacks empathy and remorse, and how best to deal with them. That's it. When I woke up to all of this in my recovery, I discovered a sort of a nightmare. The more I learned about narcissism and codependency fitting together like dysfunctional puzzle pieces, the more I learned how to identify a highly narcissistic person, the more I realized my entire world was peppered with narcs. And I hadn't been making very healthy choices since I had been an abused child. And, you know, life was fun sometimes, but mostly something I was surviving. And yes, I did have fun sometimes, but no joy. I had no idea what that even was until long into my healing. The narcissists I had unknowingly aligned with could only have connections that were transactional. Now I look back and I realize I always did have this feeling of something missing. I just assumed it was my fault, or I was just wanting and needing something that was just too much to ask for. In my low self-esteem heart, I believed anyone who wanted to be around me was ultimately just doing me a favor. I had a sense of having what I now call a semi-connection, but no deep connection or peace. I had intermittent approval from others, but no real self-respect. And that intermittent approval, I now know, was a powerful tactic and tool used against me to keep me hooked on the abusive person or people in my life. No highly narcissistic person wants you to feel completely secure in your relationship with them. I mean, no, they want you to always be just a little bit off balance and asking how high if they say jump. To the outside world, you know, I looked like I was doing good most of the time, but inside I was barely hanging on. And sadly, I never told anyone because I was ashamed. I thought, like everything else, it was just another thing that was wrong with me. It's now been well over a decade, and I still struggle with PTSD and complex trauma, but not at all like it was before. It has gotten so much better. And I have had to make peace with the possibility that there may always be some residual effect from all those years of trauma and abuse. Therapy is extraordinarily awesome. I would also say that a great deal of the healing for me has been gaining so much understanding and clinical insight from my years of deep dive research and study. Not everyone's path is the same. For me, my survival and healing required me to no longer have some people in my life and going no contact with my long-term abuser meant, sadly, having to say goodbye to a very large portion of my community. And sadly, in that community, many people I had supported and loved for 20 years or more seemed perfectly fine, believing some very terrible and very clever smear campaigns that lasted many years against me. Lies that included me being physically and emotionally abusive to who? To my abuser. What was being done to me was exactly what my abuser was saying I had done. Now I know that's called projection. I now know that if you ever want to know what the hell an abuser is up to, just listen to what they're accusing you of. And all of this just really, it rocked me to my core. And it left me starting my life from scratch and alone in a way I had never known, or at least allowed myself to really look at. And somehow my higher self knew to just keep putting one lonely, hurting foot in front of the other. And I kept realizing there was yet another person in my life that I needed to just walk away from. So many alleged friendships that I was starting to realize had always been really all about them, not about the both of us in an equal and reciprocal way. And to these sorts of alleged friends, to them I was an afterthought or an option. I was a funny and enjoyable novelty and only included because of my usefulness. And I am very useful. How many phone calls where not one real question beyond the compulsory "how are you" at the beginning was ever asked? And at that was thrown at me like scraps from a table. So many folks I was always sourcing. I was helping them find apartments and jobs, holding their hands through all their breakups, hosting all those holidays and birthdays where I did all the work. I did the shopping, the decorating, the cooking, the staffing, the cleaning. But when it was their turn to show up and show out, not so much. At first it made me mad. Then I realized how used I had let myself be. And I was humiliated. I felt a sense of shame and embarrassment about all of it. And as much as that part of my healing, and I think it's another moment for a sophisticated clinical term, really sucked, it was also the beginning of me taking my power back in a new way. Because if I had co-created every single one of those moments, if I had co-chosen those relationships, if I had allowed for the treatment I had gotten, then, like at the end of The Wizard of Oz, I had the power all along. While that period of my suffering and my healing was at times just gut-wrenchingly painful, it was also survivable and completely worth it. Please believe me, if you are resonating with my story, I want you to know you can do this, however it looks for you. And standing up for your own life is so worth it. It gave me my true life. Now, there's no histrionic screaming matches in my home. There's no heartbreaking discoveries of betrayal. There's no middle of the night drama. In my life, things I do now are like giggle and create YouTube programs to help others. Now there's not one single selfish, manipulative, uncaring jackass to be found anywhere in my circle. The life I never even dreamed was possible. A life that belongs to me, that I own outright. A life filled with two things I had never known as a constant, as a lifestyle. And those two things are peace and joy. A life of learned lessons and things like embracing unapologetic cast iron boundaries, like self-care as a holistic way of living a new lifestyle, a moment-by-moment check-in to see how I feel about what's happening and what do I need right now? Does this work for me? How can I nurture, soothe, validate, and love myself right now in this shining, sparkling moment of my life of choice I define, not circumstance or any other person. Now in hindsight, I would cheerfully take just one drop of real peace over two whole buckets full of fun. I would take my 3 or 4 dearest real friends celebrating my birthday over that worst birthday of my life where I had over 80 guests. I don't think hardly one of them are in my life now. I guess none of us will ever know really just how strong we are until we are taken to that existential wall. And some of the very best things that exist won't ever grow until they're finally left alone. Things like me doing over 10 years of daily research and reaching, learning, changing, healing, and growing so that I could have some time to really live before I die, to know peace and joy, and to get to help others heal themselves like me so that they can have the same blessings in their lives. And lastly, to get to be the Narc Ninja. Thank you so much for going through this journey with me. If I have helped you, it is my great honor to do so. There's no way, obviously, to include everything about this terrible growing subject in 10 short videos. And unlike some other wonderful people out there creating content on this subject, I didn't go to school to get a PhD in psych. I am a survivor of long-term severe abuse who worked his ass off to learn, to heal, and to finally get to have a life I can call my own. And wild horses could not have stopped me from sharing what recovery looks like from a survivor's perspective. There's so many more things in my heart and mind about all of this, and if it's possible that my efforts could have helped somebody like me, then that makes all the work more than worth it. I hope so much that you will help me grow this dream called the Narc Ninja, so that we together can help even more people who right now are just like I was, and maybe some of you too, just sitting ducks to be taken advantage of, to seduce, use, abuse, and discard, all because they have sweet hearts that couldn't conceive of, let alone know about what to be on the lookout for and how to protect themselves from the predatory manipulators, and so often very charming abusers. So be on the lookout for my new stuff. I've got videos coming out and all sorts of new things. I'm planning a podcast. You can also check out all of my other mostly daily free content on the Gram and on Facebook with the links in the description. I'm also releasing 2 new ebooks. One is the workbook that includes a resource guide and journal for this very series, of course, called the Narc Ninja 101 Survival Guide Workbook, and a book called The Great Emotional Detox, which is a 7-day emotional detox program using an extraordinary combination of tools, including the wisdoms of the ancient Eleusinian mystery schools, with healing tools that date back as far as 750 BC. And that's all soon to be available on Amazon. Thank you so much for watching, and until we meet again, keep shining your light of kindness and be you to the full. Like Dory says, just keep swimming. Oh, and to quote the great Alexandra Billings, did you know, true fact, that we are all made of stardust? And since that's true, anything is possible.